If you're looking for a small ornamental tree for your garden, you've come to the right video. This Golden Falls Redbud will be an example of the 50 small ornamental trees in this video. They range in size, you know, from things that'll get 5 or 6 feet up to, you know, 25 feet or so. Some flowering, some not, but lots of great choices for your garden. This is a pink cascade weeping cherry, and this can be almost anything you want it to be in your garden. This one's low grafted, meaning it's grafted right down at ground level, and then it's been trained up this stake over time. And so you can train it up to whatever height you want it. So you could keep this one right now at, I think if it was planted in the ground, it's about 6 feet tall. You could continue to stake it up and make it as high as maybe 15, even 20 feet if you wanted to. But then everything that's left on the plant is going to weep down from that point for whatever height you want it to get. And then the width is going to be determined by you as well. The branches are going to get wider over time. So somewhere between 6 and you could probably allow it to get 10, 15 feet. This one has really, really bright pink flowers in the spring. We're shooting this after it's leafed out and finished flowering at this point, but really bright pink flowers followed by this beautiful weeping habit and these dark green leaves during the summertime, followed by nice reddish yellow fall color. And then of course you get this architectural look in the garden during the winter months. So truly a 12-month plant. Again, it can be staked however you want to stake it and kept however you want to keep it. This one I think was done between NC State, was involved in this one. Really neat plant if you're looking for a small ornamental tree. And again, you know, if you decide you want to stake up a piece a little higher than it is in your garden at any given time, you can and make it larger. This is Cercis canadensis, which is our native redbud. We got so many named cultivars and named varieties and weeping varieties and all the beautiful colored foliage varieties of redbuds. Seems like they're falling from the sky every year, new ones. But I think we should you know, continue to think about using our just straight native redbud, because there is nothing wrong with it. It is a really quite a striking plant on its own without any hybridizing, where you have that new foliage is always that kind of maroonish red color, followed by, you know, those leaves get larger in time, become these pretty big heart-shaped leaves. One of the more interesting things about this plant is how it continues to bloom on even the oldest wood on the plant. You know, you'll have, you know, flowers along the stems from, you know, top to bottom all the way up. Pollinators absolutely go crazy for these when they bloom early. They bloom before the leaves start to come out on the plant. Any kind of warm day you get, the native bees come out in a big way on these native redbuds. Flowers are edible. Sometimes I forget to mention that. Love the heart-shaped leaves. These are going to get, I mean, you'll see them. The one in our garden at the house is about maxed out at 20 feet tall, 25 feet tall, something like that. It's a typical understory tree here. But I'll tell you what, the top of this tree really does like the sun. It likes its roots in the shade and the top in the sun. And if we see them in their kind of natural habitat along the interstate highway, you'll see them all along the edge come into flower in the early spring, where they like to have their roots down in that shady area and then the top of the tree out in the sun. That's how ours is at the house. So ours is on the west side of the house actually, and there's other things planted around it. And the roots of that plant are never in the direct sun really, but the top of the plant is. It's up above the house. These things seed themselves really well, and so if you have a regular straight eastern redbud like this, you are going to have some seedlings in all likelihood that you can pull, or decide to keep a few of them if you want to. But it's in that pea family, and it has these little pea pod seeds, which are also actually an interesting part of the tree that form on them after about the time the leaves are coming out. Not right before the leaves are fully formed, you'll see those seed pods hanging all over them in a good. Again, these pea family plants are good at producing seed, but definitely got to give something to our just straight native redbud. This is a Dura-Heat river birch. I had one of these at the old house if you've been following along with the channel for a long time. This is a heat tolerant, slightly more compact growing river birch that is more heat tolerant, probably much better for the kind of spaces that we tend to plant river birches. I mean, they're called river birches, and people take them and put them in the front, their front yard in the middle of their lawn on some slope where they get virtually no water. This one is kind of a selection that will hold up to that a little bit better. Also has a bit more white in the bark and the exfoliating bark. They don't have, when they're this young, they're not going to have that exfoliating bark, but as they age, they get that beautiful paper-like bark on them. And this one, again, it's very, very white. They're reputedly more insect resistant too. I do not know if that's actually accurate or not, but this is a great, this one's, mine was probably 30 feet tall as I was leaving the house, maybe 15 feet in width, something like that up at the top. Very rapid grower. I will tell you that, most people, if you're picking a single kind of small ornamental tree for your garden, keep in mind this one's going to get fairly heavily, it's going to root out pretty heavily. So I wouldn't put this thing near septic tanks necessarily if you have a septic system. And if you only have one tree to pick, keep in mind this one's going to run roots all over the place. I think this one is probably better suited for a slightly larger garden where you're picking lots of things and you may have a tricky spot that maybe stays seasonally wet or something like that. I think it would overall be better conditions. It does get good yellow fall color as well. But definitely want to point this one out that if you're wanting a river birch, you just have to have one. Pick Dura Heat is going to be a good one for most of our kind of dry suburban gardens that we have where we're mowing grass around them and that kind of thing. This is a newer selection of Redbud called Black Pearl. And also newly potted as well, so not a giant plant to look at, but you can see this really beautiful dark foliage. This one's interesting because it was actually a seedling cross between Ruby Falls, which is a weeping one, and a gold foliage one. And you end up with with Rising Sun and Ruby Falls, and you end up with slightly upright. It will have a kind of I've seen a slightly larger one where the limbs are kind of out like this on it, but it doesn't have the weeping habit of Ruby Falls and it doesn't have the gold foliage of Rising Sun. But what it does have is a lot of heat tolerance in this purple foliage, and that's something that we have a lot of purple foliage varieties out on the market for years, but they tend to be green by mid to late summer. The sun just kind of wears them out, and this one apparently holds this color really well through the summertime. It can get 20 feet tall and wider than that if you want it to in time, or you can kind of control the size a bit on it. Some of these hybrid redbuds have a lot of hybrid vigor in them. They grow pretty quick during the growing season, but I thought this one would be interesting to show off with that really beautiful dark foliage that apparently holds up really well through the summer heat. This is a Tomukiyama Japanese maple. This one is one of the great weeping Japanese maples. Has the beautiful dark purple lace leaf, really fine textured Japanese maple, and you may recognize this one from our videos from the house. I have one that I've turned into kind of a serpentine branch, a central leader. These were limbed up to, I guess this looks like about 5 feet. They're grafted low, and then this thing's been trained up to about 5 feet, and everything now will weep down from this. You can continue to train these weepers upright if you decide that you have one that's smaller than you want. So I could literally top this out right here if I wanted to and keep this thing as a 3 or 4 foot tall plant and just let it get as wide as I want to let it get. Or I can continue to train a branch up higher like this, and then ultimately wherever you decide that caps out, everything else is going to weep down from that. This one holds its color really well, but I'll show you where it leafed out. These are newly planted, and so they have them pot to pot. They'll spread them eventually, once they're rooted into the containers. But you can see without that direct sunlight that it's very green. Okay, so this is a good, for us in the South, we need these in part shade, but there's a limit to that shade, right? Before they actually are just green. In the North, this one's gonna take a full sun. By the time we get further south, it does need, again, part shade. great understory tree, and you can turn this one into literally an art piece if you want to. This is one of our great native magnolias here. This is Magnolia virginiana, or Sweet Bay Magnolia, and then this is a named cultivar called Green Shadow that was actually selected for its leaf retention, and it's very floriferous as well. These tend to grow in the understory. These will grow up to zone 5 and down to zone 10. And we do call these evergreen magnolias, but in zone 5, they're definitely going to lose the vast majority of their leaves. So up in like the Chicago area would be an example of that. And then down further in the south, they're going to retain more of their leaves. They bloom May and June, typically very, very fragrant flowers, of course. Magnolias are amongst the oldest lineage of flowering plants on Earth, and before bees were around. And so they were likely pollinated by beetles originally that crawled up in those flowers. But incredible fragrance. This is a great understory tree. And like Steph said before we turned the camera on, I need to mention that some of these magnolias are very difficult to grow in containers. They don't necessarily look their best in containers. This is true of the Magnolia types, like our Stella Ruby magnolia at the house. These Magnolia virginianas, even some of the Magnolia grandifloras can look a little rough in containers. They don't like to be grown in container nursery situations all that well. And you put them in the ground and all of a sudden it's a much fuller, floriferous, nicer looking plant ultimately in the ground. But this is one of our great natives. This is a native species of fringe tree to the southeast, Chionanthus pygmaeus, and we have one of these in the native garden at home. And ours is a low graft, and it's going to be very shrubby in nature, and that's fine for what we're trying to do in the native garden. These are grafted ones that have been then trained up into small tree forms here. These have been worked on for a little while here, but they are grafted, and basically means they're taking a stem off of one and then grafting it onto one of our other native species of Chionanthus to the southeast, because this thing is endangered. It's federally endangered, actually. There's very few left in the wild in Central Florida, and so you can't collect one in the wild. Good, and so the way we can continue to grow this plant and get it out into the world is by grafting pieces off of ones that are already in nursery production like this and getting these out into the world. But this is a really nice crop. These, again, I don't know what the price on one of these 7 gallons that's grafted like this and has been tree formed this nice. I have no idea what the price is on this plant. It's probably not inexpensive, but definitely worth it, and certainly something to talk about. And again, super interesting endangered plant to the southeast United States. This is a newly potted crop of a Amelanchier or serviceberry called Rainbow Pillar, which is a super interesting selection. It was selected from some seedlings, and it just has this super upright, narrow habit where we tend to think about Amelanchiers as being multi-trunked shrub-like growth, or sometimes frequently, single stem, trained as single stemmed plants like ours at our garden at the house. But this one has this super narrow upright growth, and this is kind of this one would have been absolutely perfect for our garden in Raleigh. You see the fruit has formed on them. That forms these like blueberry type fruit from a white flower that happens very early. So they get the white flowers, foliage comes out, berries form on them, and they resemble blueberries on the tree. They have a very short lifespan. Otherwise, this would be commercially available fruit because they're really tasty. If you ever come by a serviceberry that has mature fruit on it, try them. They're just really excellent. We went to a park in Charlotte last year that just happened to have a row that were in full fruit at that time, and just ate because they're so tasty. But again, they just, nobody's ever really been able to figure out how to turn that into, something we could have on the grocery store shelves necessarily. This one is, again, upright, narrow habit. Most people watching can grow this. It's going to get great fall color and just a super interesting habit. Again, these are newly potted and they need to be staked and need a little bit of work on them, but I wanted to show this plant off because I think this is a really good example of a native plant that will work in a small garden. This is a Encore Kousa or Korean dogwood called Snow Tower. It is a upright kind of fastigiate growth habit. A lot of Kousas will get the flat kind of growth and get pretty wide over time, but this is one was selected to have this upright narrow habit. Plus it's extremely floriferous. Really great looking tree overall. Nice flowers, nice foliage, good red fall color, upright narrow habit, really nice understory tree. Gets a red, if you've had familiar with Encore Kousa at all, you'll get a red fruit on it toward late fall and early winter that is edible if it actually fully forms on the tree. So great. They tend to be a little more disease resistant than our native dogwoods and our, like people don't like to hear those kinds of things, but they are a little more disease resistant overall. Very little maintenance to do on Kousa dogwoods. Sometime in the late winter, after flowering and after they flush out, you'll find that you'll have a dead limb, dead pieces here or there that can be pruned out. That's about all the maintenance that you need to do on it. If you get a limb that's going wider than you want on this vestigiate variety that sticks out, you can cut that off kind of whenever. But other than that, really easy plant. Perfect little understory tree or small ornamental tree for a small lot. This is a Golden Falls Redbud, and I wanted to shoot this one at the nursery rather than at our house, because the one at our house is about right at 6 feet tall. So I see these being sold on the tables at 3 feet tall, okay, at the stores, and then 6 feet tall. This one's 8 feet tall. Basically, you can continue to take pieces and stake them higher. So you can make this plant higher, but wherever you stake it to, that is the height, as everything else is gonna come down from that. And then if you want to in the future, if you find a new piece growing up at the top and you wanna stake it a little higher, you can. But this thing is whatever height you stake it to, everything else is going to come to the ground. This one's got a lot of hybrid vigor, and we find that it grows several feet per year and ends up on the ground, and we just keep limbing it up off the ground. I have not found this tree to be as floriferous as other of our native redbuds, and may just be ours. I don't know if that's the case or not. But it doesn't really matter, because once the leaves come out on it, it has this incredible, beautiful chartreuse leaf, and they'll get about this big. They'll lose a bit of that color as the season goes on. You'll notice that it's heading toward green by late season, but it still has good color to it overall. Beautiful plant. One other thing I'll throw out there is I think it almost has to be permanently staked. So this one is staked in this container, and we have not figured out a way to unstake ours, because it still continues to want to lean in different directions. And so I think it will be permanently staked in the garden, but you can't see the stake. It's covered up by the weeping branches down to the ground. When it loses its leaves in the winter, we go in and we take the tape off of it and restake it each year to make sure that we're not doing damage to the tree. But it is a beautiful ornamental tree, and we call ours in our garden Cousin It. This is Venus dogwood. This is an interesting hybrid, interspecies hybrid between a Chinese dogwood and one from the Pacific Northwest, or the Pacific dogwood. And it has some hybrid vigor in it. This thing will get 20, 25 feet tall, very disease resistant, beautiful flowers, of course, really nice foliage, great habit. When we're filming this in a nursery container, it doesn't necessarily show off, its best form when things are being grown kind of close together like this. Gets great fall color on it. Really all the things that you would love about a dogwood, but it's anthracnose resistant. So it's resistant to some of the disease issues that cornice can get. And again, kind of a little bit of hybrid vigor in it. This one can grow pretty quick, but beautiful flowers, beautiful fall color, all the things you'd want in a dogwood, and hopefully a little bit of disease resistance built in. This is an Autumn Brilliance serviceberry, and you can find this one at the store either as a shrub with its kind of multi-trunk shrub, or as a tree form where it's been pruned up into a tree. You'll continue to have to do some bottom pruning on them because they are kind of suckering trees naturally. But this is a native. Lots and lots of people watching this can grow these. They're in the rose family, so they start the season off with those little 5-petal white flowers that you would, pretty typical of rose family things, and then they develop the foliage, which is nice, and then a fruit that's blueberry-like It ends up turning blue, quite tasty. A lot of times the animals, you have to beat the animals to them. They don't last very long off the tree, so you need to eat them pretty quickly if you're going to eat them. But this is the tree we picked. We had, you know, basically the front garden is very small and we're picking one tree. And so this was the tree for us. We weren't going for a shade tree and weren't going for the smallest ornamental tree either. This one kind of fits the sweet spot in between that, where you can, you know, 25 feet, something like that you would expect from this. Of course, this is a newly potted one, so it's not filled out, and, you know, this is not a finished tree here at this nursery, but great 4-season plant, incredibly vivid, bright fall color. This is truly a unique tree right here. One thing I'll say is that when we're talking about understory trees, small ornamental trees like this styrax that I'm about to talk about, a lot of them are for part shade. They're understory trees. They're kind of small for a reason because they stayed in the understory of other trees, but the styrax here will take full sun. This is Marley's Pink Parasol. Has nice kind of soft pink flowers on it. Obviously a weeper. This is a Japanese styrax. We do have a native styrax species as well. The Japanese styrax tend to be like little uniform soldiers. They're upright trees, and typically you can put 10 of them in a row and have them be absolutely like clones of one another, soldiers in a line. This is a weeping form of it. And this one will be whatever height it's kind of staked at. Okay, so this one right now in the ground is probably right at about 5 feet. But you could continue to stake up a branch straight up if you want to and add some height to that. So the height is whatever you want it to be, between 5 feet and 10 feet or 12 feet, whatever. The width is narrow because you can see all the branches are going to come straight down on it. Beautiful spring flowers, and then beautiful green foliage the rest of the season. Of course, once it loses its leaves in the fall, it has this incredible architectural habit. And this one can take full sun or part shade. I think they're hardy in like zone 5 to 9, so pretty much everybody watching can grow one of these beautiful weeping styrax. This is a tree that Steph and I absolutely love. This is a Styrax japonicus called Evening Light, and it is a dark foliage styrax, Japanese styrax, or Japanese snowbell are the common names for these. Those striking white flowers against this dark foliage is just shocking when you see this plant. I've several years have kind of wanted one of these, and we may end up with one in the garden at some point. These can be suckering trees, and so you can get a multi-stemmed one. This one is limbed up into a single central stem here, and then it has this dark foliage in the spring, these beautiful white flowers. You can get some uniformity in these in the ground if you're looking for, you know, 3 plants in a row. You can keep this one on the narrower side. I mean, it has a tendency to be that way, but it ultimately can get about 10 feet in width. You don't have to let it get that wide, maybe 15 feet in height. Interestingly, this one was discovered in Boskop in the Netherlands, and Steph and I are going to be visiting there, hopefully bringing some interesting, it's one of the great nursery towns on Earth, and we're going to be doing some filming over there coming up, and maybe we'll end up at the nursery that discovered this beautiful, beautiful Japanese styrax. Maybe the most popular crepe myrtle of all time. This is Natchez crepe myrtle. This is a white flowering crepe myrtle that has just it's the most crepe myrtle because it can be single trunked, but most often it's a multi-trunked tree like this, like they have this one trained right now. It ends up with the beautiful red bark that that we love about crepe myrtles, with that really smooth bark. Interesting root flare, the beautiful root flares these things get out in the, as they mature as well. And then it has beautiful white flowers on kind of a weeping head. So the right at the top of the plant, all this growth comes out so quickly, it almost weights it down in the spring, and then we get the flowers during the summertime. Actually draw in pollinators. There's always quite a few bees on these crepe myrtles when they're blooming, despite the fact that they're not native to this area, although it seems like they're native to this area because virtually every garden in Raleigh has a crepe myrtle in it of some kind. The dwarf ones, tall ones. Natchez is going to get big. So this one is, really, we would consider this, it's definitely an ornamental tree, but if you left Natchez to its own, never pruned it, this thing can get very, very big, 35, 40 feet, probably ultimately, something like that, with a very big trunk down at the base of it. Frequently, unfortunately, you know, the wrong tree is picked a lot of times. This one we see planted under power lines and that kind of thing in our neighborhood, and they end up with the tops cut out of them and don't look particularly great. But this one, again, I think is the most crepe myrtle because it has the bark, it has the foliage, it has the flowers, it has that kind of weeping habit on it when it's in flower. During peak summer, it's very long flowered as well. And there's a reason it's probably the biggest selling one of probably all time. Here's a sweet bay magnolia that's sold out in the world as moonglow. It's got a vigorous habit, tends to be more evergreen in the northern areas. So in the south, these are evergreen, and by the time you get into northern areas, they're cold hardy, but they don't retain the leaves during the wintertime. Typically, this one has a little bit more leaf retention the further north you go. These can end up 30 feet in height, probably 20 feet in width, ultimately, if you let them. Frequently, they're going to be multi-trunked down at the bottom, but you can find the occasional single-trunked one out on the market as well. Of course, they're going to get those creamy white flowers in May and June that are incredibly fragrant. Great native plant. And again, I always have to talk, when we talk about magnolias, we have to talk about, you know, they're one of the oldest flowering plants, you know, plants on the planet. And, you know, they were around before bees. And so, you know, they were likely pollinated by beetles. Really that incredibly fragrant flowers. And I gotta love this plant. This is Magnolia virginiana moonglow. Stepping into the video just a second to talk about our Learn to Garden video series and our weekly garden planner that are over on our website, HortTube.com. There are discount codes down below the video for both of them. If you're looking for design ideas and how to plant, how to prepare beds and prepare for the most success with your new flowering tree or your ornamental tree, then the Learn to Garden video series is for you. If you're looking for how to maintain and weekly advice, literally week by week advice on how to maintain your garden and your beautiful trees in your landscape, that's for the weekly garden planner. Thanks for watching. This is a Magnolia stellata, otherwise known as star magnolia. This one is called Royal Star. It was actually selected because it has slightly larger flowers than the straight species. So this one will get 3 to 4 inch strappy kind of white flowers on it in the early spring, which of course are incredibly fragrant. This tree, you know, I'm gonna put 10 to 20 feet in height on it because you can keep it kind of whatever size you ultimately want to keep it. But, you know, it'll creep up to 20 feet in time and probably 12 to 15 feet in width if you let it, but you can prune it accordingly. This is a really nice specimen here that's single trunked, but as you can look down here at the bottom of it, for sure, this is a, you know, it's a suckering tree. So if you're going to try to keep it as a single trunk like this, you will have a little bit of maintenance on it in the future, keeping some of those suckers down. Most people are going to grow these star magnolias as kind of multi-trunked, small ornamental trees. It's going to take full sun. A lot of the understory or small ornamental trees are going to be part shade, part shade, part shade. They're understory trees, but this one will go out in the middle of your garden if you want, if you're looking for a small tree. Fragrant flowers. I will say the star magnolias tend to bloom just a hair earlier than some of the other deciduous magnolias. This one loses its leaves, and it makes them vulnerable to frost and freezes. So frequently, you know, not frequently, but at least every other year, probably you're going to take some damage if it's going to drop, you know, back into the 20s when this thing is in full bloom. This is Magnolia X Yellowbird. This is a yellow flowering magnolia. It's actually Magnolia X brooklynensis, because this one were crosses that were found were made at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. So brooklynensis is what they've given it as the species name. It's a cross between, I think the original crosses for these were acuminata, which is an Eastern North American native, and a Chinese liliflora species originally, and then they've been crossed multiple times, and they ended up with this incredible yellow one, and we really want this tree. This has been, every single time we've seen this, we have been super drawn to it. This one's in the process of being staked up into a single trunk. it can be multi-trunked as well, and I don't know how you'll find it out in, you know, if you were out shopping for this plant. It's a vigorous grower, and this one can get 30 or 40 feet. So, you know, it's somewhere in the, you know, where does that become a shade tree versus an ornamental tree? Large, beautiful leaves on it, incredible yellow flowers that just, you know, we just absolutely love this plant when we see it. But a super interesting cross of a native and a Chinese species, and then again worked on for a while and ended up with this incredible yellow version of it. We have Golden Falls Redbud in our garden at the house. This is Ruby Falls. This is the purple foliage version of it. So it leaves out purple in the spring. In some period of time over the course of the summer, by late summer, I see this one on the greener side. These leaves are still a little small. They're just leafing out as we're filming this, and they will be very large in time, as wide as, you know, 4 inches in width. Right now, they're probably more like 2 inches in width. Again, they just, as they come out and the leaves mature, they get bigger and bigger. This one flowers along the stems on the oldest part of the plant all the way out to the newest part a few weeks back as we're filming this with no leaves on it. I love how redbuds bloom like that, even on the oldest part of the tree. They are edible. If you want to eat the flowers, you can. And then this one leaves out with this purple foliage, and it has this weeping habit. So this one has to be staked whatever height you want to keep it. So if I'm buying this one and I'm not doing anything else to it, this is the height it's going to be permanently. Every branch, maybe I'll get a branch that comes up like this and adds a tiny bit of height to it, but everything is going to be downward. But in the future, if you get a branch that kind of comes out near the trunk here, if you want to stake it up a little higher, you absolutely can. I will tell you that our Golden Falls, every Golden Falls I see is very similar. They're about this wide, and they weep straight down to the ground. Every Ruby Falls I see has its own character. So some are really wide. Some have branches that are, I don't see two of them alike ever, but that keeps it interesting too, right? They are beautiful, beautiful trees, definitely worth it. I will say, these are understory trees, part shade understory trees, and sometimes purple can get lost in those situations. And so you may want to put something, make sure there's something behind this that allows this to stand out. Because if you're in a area with long shadows and you step away from this any distance, you're going to start to lose the definition in it. It's just going to become this really dark thing in the landscape. So chartreuse foliage or light green foliage mixed with this will make it stand out in the landscape. This is Cercis canadensis zigzag, and you can see why it's called zigzag right there as Steph is up close on it. It has this really wild pattern of growth where it goes back and forth, and each time it does one of those twists is where a next branch comes out on it. It has a slightly weeping habit overall. I mean, I wouldn't call it completely weeping, but it definitely these branches tend to come off of where one of those little zigzags is and start to go down just a bit. So it'll have slightly narrower habit. Saw this plant several years ago down, Dr. Durr showed me one of them, and I was just enamored by it then. And now we're finally seeing them out in the world now. It's green foliage, and so we've got all of this breeding in these red buds for yellow foliage and red foliage and, you know, purple foliage and all kinds of things going on with them, and multicolored. So this one's going to have the green foliage, basic native thing, but it's a beautiful heart-shaped leaf. This one blooms heavily, and then this one may be the most interesting plant in your garden in the wintertime, right? When this thing loses these leaves in the fall, it's going to have this incredible zigzag pattern up that main trunk, and then on the older branches it develops it as well as the wider branches come off of it. So really maybe one of the more interesting winter trees that you could possibly have in your garden. Again, it's straight Cercis canadensis, so it's still going to be a vigorous kind of upright, 20-25 feet tall, probably 10-15 feet in width ultimately, but absolutely stunningly beautiful in the wintertime. This is Styrax japonicus, or Japanese snowbell. It's a fairly common ornamental tree that we use in our gardens. The main thing I would point out about this tree is that this is a tree, there's not a lot of trees that you could plant 3 or 5 of in a straight line and have them all kind of look alike. These trees tend to be neat and orderly. And some people like that in their garden, and some people don't care if the tree's a little chaotic and has a mind of its own. These tend to have very layered branching, very vigorous, semi-vigorous growers, beautiful flowers in the spring. The flowers are neat. The plant stays neat. It has nice fall color. And if you're looking for something to put in a row and have them all kind of be clones of one another, this is one of the easier trees to have that happen with. It can, when something is that neat, sometimes it can be out of place in certain types of gardens, but if you have a garden that you really like, formal looking things, and you're looking for a small ornamental tree, you really can't beat this. This is going to be on the small side of ornamental trees, but this is Acer palmatum butterfly, one of the absolute most beautiful of all Japanese maples, in my opinion, upright Japanese maples, in my opinion. Just absolutely incredible variegation in this plant. They'll start off with kind of a pink hue to them and then settle into this beautiful variegation. Has the kind of reddish pink stems on it. This one can be kept as a container plant and kept pretty small for years, or go out in the landscape, and become a small ornamental tree over time. Really am always been drawn to this plant. Definitely in the south, with the Japanese maples, the further south you go, the more shade they're going to need, and this variegated one is definitely going to need an overstory, something over top of it, shading it. It needs good bright light in order to do this, so don't put it in the shadiest place in your garden. It's more about having high shade above it that will keep it from burning, but still allow enough light in to keep this color on it. Here's our native fringe tree, Kyananthus virginicus, and this one is called Spring Fleecing. It was named by Sam Allen from Tar Heel Native Trees. Tar Heel Native Trees, the nursery, doesn't exist anymore, but I used to do quite a bit of business with them. A couple of their employees have other nurseries out in the world. Jason Stevens, who you've seen on the channel, is one of those of Sam's employees that has, still out there doing super interesting things out in the world. This one was selected. It's a male selection, and so it blooms consistently every year, very fragrant flowers on them. It will pollinate a female Kyananthus virginicus, and those have the edible fruit on the females, but this one has is extremely floriferous during the growing season. Really nice selection of our great native, and again, it was selected because it just blooms like crazy. There's one right there that still has a lot of the flowers on them. We're getting past flowering time as we're filming this. You'll notice, of course, there's a Chinese fringe tree that we see out in the wild quite a bit. You'll notice the slightly more pointy leaf on the native. On the native tends to have that point. The leaves will get bigger in time though, like this. But the Chinese fringe tree tends to have a slightly more muted end to the leaf overall. Here's one of our great native understory trees or large shrubs. You may describe this as a shrub. Actually, we're kind of growing ours as a shrub at the house, because typically they're going to be multi-trunk in the ground. But this one's been limbed up into a small ornamental tree. This is a red buckeye, firecracker plant, and all kinds of things that this one will go by. Has these beautiful tubular red flowers on it in the spring that the hummingbirds and bees are very, very drawn to. As you can see, literally, there's nothing more attractive to a hummingbird than a red tubular flower like that. The blooms stay on for a pretty long time, and I always love when these things leaf out. This entire structure here is new this season. So it came out from here. This little part right here at the top had died out. 2 pieces came out. All of these leaves formed and the flowers formed all in the same shot. So it's like fully leafed out. In flower. A lot of these spring flowering trees like this, typically the flowers come out and then the foliage kind of covers that up in time. But I'm always interested in the growth habit of these. This can get 25 feet tall in the understory. In the woods, most people again keep them as much smaller ornamental trees than that. I love the foliage on them. Love the flowers. I don't think there's not really any better native ornamental to the southeast United States, grown all over the world at this point, I'm sure, because why not? Look at this incredible incredible flowering tree. There are thousands of named Japanese maples out in the world, so if I'm including them in some sort of ornamental tree video or a Japanese maple video, I'd like to have them be kind of interesting, you know, and kind of stand alone, not just, you know, there's 100 different variegated ones and 100 different red foliage ones and hundreds of weepers and so on and so forth. But this one is a definite standout. This is Twombly's Red Sentinel. We have this one in our garden. What I really like about it is we have a small garden space that oftentimes the camera kind of confuses people because it's a wide angle lens. When people come to the garden, they go, wow, it is in fact a fairly small space. But this one fits that perfect because it's upright, narrow habit. Wanted to stop at this one because this really shows this off, right? How narrow this thing is growing on its own here in this nursery. Doesn't look like it's been pruned ever. It has this great red foliage and it's reputedly holds up better than some others. So, you know, where we have Bloodgood and lots of other named red upright Japanese maples out there, a lot of those in the south especially turn very green by the time the summertime is over, and this one holds its color much better. So really great selection and a unique selection among, you know, again, a plant that's been selected over and over and over and over again for all kinds of different uses and different interesting characteristics. But this one is definitely a standout. This is a tree-formed Hydrangea paniculata. So this one's been turned into a single trunk and then just continued to grow straight, and then you just cut it back and you form a head on the top of it. We have one of these we've been working on in our garden at the house, if you've been following along with the channel. Originally, when I started in this business, they all got very, very big, and so we called Hydrangea paniculatas tree hydrangeas. So PG hydrangea and Pinky Winky were the two that I grew. Over time, we've seen Hydrangea paniculata shrink down in our gardens and probably be better ornamental, small growing shrubs, medium-sized growing shrubs. But the old varieties lend themselves to being tree formed, like this one is. Of course, they bloom on new wood, so you don't have to worry about the wintertime damaging them, so they'll grow all the way up to zone 4. And then they bloom from midsummer on. So most of the other hydrangeas will have kind of finished blooming when these start, and then they have the giant, you know, white inflorescences. Some of the old varieties had looser kind of inflorescences and had all the flower parts in them, so you'd see more bees on them. Some of the newer breeding, you know, there's much fuller, thicker white flowers, and they don't necessarily have all the flower parts, so you see less pollinators overall on them. But don't discount Hydrangea paniculata. The old varieties are really great ornamental trees. This is an interesting tree form here, and of course it's just leafing out for the spring, so you're not seeing it in its full glory, but this is Viburnum opulus roseum. Regular Viburnum opulus is known as Eastern cranberry bush or European cranberry bush, gets a flat cluster of flowers that then becomes this really decorative red berry in the fall and tends to grow kind of shrubby, very shrubby. This roseum is a sterile, this is the snowball version of it. It's got a round sterile inflorescence. They're usually about this big. Again, this tree is just coming out from dormancy, but it's been tree formed, which is super interesting. No one in the nursery business has met anything yet they won't try to turn into a tree for sure. But it's got a beautiful straight trunk on it, and it really makes an interesting tree. These have a maple-like leaf on them, a little different than some other viburnum. They get beautiful fall color on them. Of course, incredibly showy flowers here and during the spring months. And again, these are just leafing out, but I wanted to show this because I think it makes a really interesting low, full sun ornamental tree that anyone could grow in their garden and then still have room underneath to underplant it. This is Oxydendrum. This is another native, beautiful native understory tree. It can ultimately in the wild get 40 feet tall, but typically in cultivation, maybe 20, 25 feet tall, something like that. Otherwise known as Sourwood or Lily of the Valley tree is another common name for this. It's actually in the Ericaceae. It's in the blueberry family, which is kind of super interesting. And you'll notice that when it gets the flowers during the summertime, they're on a raceme, little white flowers on a raceme that the bees absolutely go crazy for, especially the honeybees. And so we all know and love Sourwood honey, of course. So this is an important tree for the production of that. It ultimately develops a red bark on the older growth. It has beautiful foliage, beautiful flowers, incredible fall color. So this one is going to have this vibrant red, beautiful red fall color. Leafing out, it has kind of a maroonish leaf as well. Always doing something interesting. This plant is well known for being intolerant of urban pollution. So this if you live, you know, right in town somewhere, this may not be the best plant for you. It prefers, again, prefers clean living. That's what we'll call it. this one, but it's kind of weird. It is well known for not really liking urban environments. But what a fantastic native tree, and super interesting that it's actually a blueberry relative. This is Cladrastis, otherwise known as the American Yellowwood. This one has a super interesting native range. As I call this thing native, it's a very narrow area out in western North Carolina, and then a few disconnected pockets over to eastern Oklahoma. Really an incredible plant. This is in the pea family, and you'll absolutely know that when it comes into flower, because it has a cluster of flowers on it similar to wisteria. And of course we have American wisteria and Chinese wisteria, but it has that same type of arranged flowers on it. Also, wisteria is also in the pea family. Then it produces a pea-like seed in a pea pod, as you would expect. These can actually get quite large, and so, you know, as much as probably 80 feet, but again, it can be more typical of that is much smaller. But there are ones out in the wild. In its native range in western North Carolina and out to eastern Oklahoma, they're going to bloom in June. For us here in our part of North Carolina, they'll bloom much earlier than that. So they'll be blooming by May typically, and again in those wisteria-like flowers that hang on them. This is one of Steph's absolute favorite trees, and there's a good reason for that. I failed to mention that the flowers are fragrant, and one other incredible thing is this beautiful foliage turns the brightest yellow you have ever seen in the fall. Just one of our great native trees for fall color. This is a very common flowering cherry, a well-known flowering cherry called okami. This one was originally, I think, given to Washington, D.C. as a gift from Japan. It's still planted on the mall in Washington. It has kind of a pinkish white flower on it in the spring. It's very floriferous. This one is well known also for being, you can see every one of them growing here. The limbs are perfectly like layered on top of one another. So it has this really beautiful habit. Very early flowering. It's actually a hybrid with Prunus incisa, which is incisa blooms for us in Raleigh in January. It's super super early flowering. Flowers later than that, but the incisa in it has it blooming pretty early during the season. Again, whitish pink flower in the rose family. Just a great structural cherry. It transplants easy, it grows easy. Some cherries can be quite a bit more finicky than okami, and it's one of the reasons it's continued to be one of the more popular trees in nursery production and cultivation and people's gardens around the country, is just because of the ease at which this thing hits the ground running and has very little problems. It is a grafted tree. So it's grafted on, the flowering part of the tree is grafted onto a rootstock, and then they're typically limbed up like this in time. But I have seen them a slightly more shrubby version of this where they weren't limbed up. But you can, you know, continue to stake it as a straight piece like this, or whatever height you buy it from. At that point, it's probably going to branch with multiple branches up at the top from there. But this is okami flowering cherry. This is Cornus alternifolia, otherwise known as the pagoda dogwood. And it's called the pagoda dogwood because the branches end up layered and kind of tiered and have a pagoda look to them. This is actually a native to eastern Canada and down into the eastern part of the United States. These are fragrant flowers, but very different than what we think about on other dogwoods, right? But forms kind of a purplish fruit over the course of the season from these flowers. It leaves out with kind of a little bit of a burgundy hue to the foliage. Then the foliage becomes really, really nice looking in time. This one has obviously been limbed up into a small tree to keep the limbs up off the ground. But again, this is another one of our great native flowering trees, and I do love the fragrance of this plant as well. Here it is in I'm filming this in the 3rd week of April. This is going to bloom much later if you're in more northern areas, but for us, it's going to be a mid-spring bloomer. In the north, it's going to be more like an early summer flowering plant, but it really turns into this interesting structural plant in time. This is Encore Kousa green sleeves. This is an Asian species of dogwood, but it shows some resistance to some disease issues that we get in our native dogwoods here in the southeast, and tends to be used quite a bit around the area here. You can see why green sleeves was picked. Look at all the flowers. This is a young plant in a 7-gallon container, and look how floriferous this thing actually is. This is a true 4-season plant, so you're gonna have these beautiful flowers in the springtime, and then incredible foliage. It's just really starting to form these lustrous green leaves. That leaf is not matured yet, but it becomes more lustrous in time. Really striking foliage on this plant. And then in the fall, it starts to pick up red and purple tones in the foliage. So it has this really great fall color as well. Not super vibrant, but it picks up those colors before it loses its leaves in the fall. And then it develops a red edible fruit from these flowers late in the fall and winter, and then it's a pretty structural plant during the winter with no leaves on it as well. But this one was, again, selected for the floriferousness of it. I mean, every single one of these, there's several. We're filming this at Panther Creek Nursery in North Carolina, and every single group of these has this many flowers on very young plants. This is a hybrid magnolia. This particular one is called Jane. Jane is part of the Little Girl series that were released at the National Arboretum, I think back in the 1950s. And they have been staples in the American landscape ever since. There's Anne and Jane, and I won't remember them all as I'm saying it out, as I'm trying to remember them right now. But Jane is probably overall the most, had become the most popular one in the trade. You can see that pink bud, the inside of the flower will be white as it opens up. Incredibly showy, incredibly fragrant. These are typically, so this, I'm looking at this group right here, and they're limbing these up into small trees. So these are going to be a single trunk tree, and you can continue just to take any type of branching or suckering that comes off of it in the future and have the limbs start up here. More typical, you're going to see these grown as low growing shrubs, as Steph is taking the camera over there to see multi-trunked shrub-like growth on them. But again, they can be limbed up into small ornamental trees as well. These can get quite large in time, but you can control the size on them. More typically in gardens, we'll see these as tall as 20 to 25 feet, but they could be kept, again, much smaller than that. They bloom pretty early in the season, and sometimes that when they come into full flower, we can get a late frost that can coincide with that and do a little damage to the open flowers. The nice thing about Jane and several of these in this Little Girl series, though, is they continue to throw flowers during the summertime. I mean, we have a Jane magnolia on the corner at our street, and it's pretty rare during the growing season. Obviously, it comes into full flower in the spring, but it's pretty rare in the rest of the growing season that we don't see 1, 2, 3, 4 flowers opening on it pretty much all summer long. This is Chionanthus retusus, otherwise known as the Chinese fringe tree. We have native fringe trees here in the southeast as well. This tree is one of the absolute best ornamental trees that structurally that you can have in your garden. This thing, it gets as wide as it does tall. So first of all, I want to say it's just leafing out, so the leaves are super small on it, but they end up pretty good size. A little bit different leaf than our native. It has a slightly more blunted end on the leaf. It's usually slightly serrated as well. Slight difference that you'll see in the leaves from our native, but it gets those same frilly kind of flowers on it that are fragrant. And then this one structurally ends up very wide typically. So when I see this one where it's really been allowed to grow, I saw one over on Elon's campus a couple years ago that was probably 25 feet tall and 25 to 30 feet in width, something like that, in full flower. And it's just magnificent tree. Good 4-season plant. It actually has this kind of exfoliating bark and structural, it turns kind of a reddish color. And with no leaves on it, you get to see all the structure of this plant. This one's being single trunk, limbed up into a single trunk tree. More typically when I see them in the ground, they're fairly low split on them, and they're multi-trunked like that from lower down on the base. Can be grown either way. But you see how the branch Branches go out just at perfect 90 degrees like that, and it ends up with this really wide habit in time. Beautiful tree, beautiful foliage, beautiful flowers, really an incredible structural tree. You need some width with this one, so you probably need to scale this to your garden. We have one in our garden called Tokyo Tower, which is a fastigiate version of this tree. It fits our garden much better than the straight Kyananthus retusus. This is Kyananthus retusus Tokyo Tower, and so this is the Chinese fringe tree, but with a fastigiate growth habit. So this one grows more upright and narrow. I have found this to be slightly less floriferous overall, although I have seen some that bloom more than others. I don't see as many flowers on it as the regular Chinese fringe tree or a native fringe tree species, either one, but it has a near perfect growth habit in our garden at home, and ours has been single trunked. This one right here has a lower split on it right here. Ours doesn't have the split until about this height, so as you're looking at it and you're shopping for it, if you want one, you know, find a single trunk when it's limbed up about like this and split, or if you don't mind it being slightly more shrubby, a little lower down on the trunk, then, you know, this one would be for you. Really incredible lustrous green foliage on these Chinese fringe trees after they flower. Again, whatever flowers you're going to get are fragrant little frilly flowers, and then followed by this really, really nice foliage. I like this tree a lot. It takes up a very small footprint in our fairly small lot in Raleigh, North Carolina. If I was on, you know, we were on an acre, I would have the regular Kyananthus retusus where I could have that width, but we're not. And so I want to have it be narrower, and I want to be able to underplant it as well. So it's Tokyo Tower, Kyananthus retusus. This is a hibiscus family member. This is Rose of Sharon. This Hibiscus syriacus is the Latin name for Rose of Sharon. Rose of Sharon has an invasive tendency in our area in Raleigh, North Carolina, but we have seen through breeding lots and lots of sterile cultivars coming out. So we get to enjoy these beautiful, most of the summer flowering shrubs in our gardens without having to worry about them getting out into the wild. This one's been tree formed. And so this one, somebody's taken the time to limb this one up in time and created this tree form up here at the top. And it could use another pruning up here at some point to kind of fill this out, make it slightly more bushy, but they're on their way to doing that now. These will start blooming late May, early June, and kind of throw flowers pretty much all summer long in that hibiscus family. So they have that little, that little center part to that flower that everything in the hibiscus family has, including okra. If you haven't grown okra has beautiful flowers as well. But I really like these in this tree form shape. I will tell you there will be some ongoing maintenance because this is a suckering plant. And so, no matter how much you want it to be a single trunk tree, it's going to try to sucker from the base in the future. So you just cut those off. It's a limited amount of maintenance, but there will be maintenance on some of these things we're trying to turn into small trees that really want to grow as multi-trunk shrubs. But great tree, needs a lot of sun, and of course picking one of the newer cultivars that is sterile is super helpful. This is a flowering peach called Corinthian Pink, and this thing really puts on a show. So this is a narrow form of a flowering peach, so it doesn't take up a big footprint. It can end up 20-25 feet tall, but it stays narrow in habit, as you can see from this one. The leaves come out with this kind of burgundy coloration on it. They turn greener over the course of the summer and then color back up in the fall, I think, to kind of a yellowish color. And then, of course, earlier we had the fragrant flowers on it that had now followed up with, really this is an ornamental peach. These peaches aren't going to become edible in time, but they're incredibly decorative on the tree. This is a great 4-season plant. It's another one that's really good for small urban lots, and it's always just kind of putting on a show, The flowers are beautiful, the fruit is beautiful, the foliage is beautiful, and the habit is beautiful. This is Poncirus or Poncirus, I hear it pronounced, trifoliata. This cultivar, this selection is called Flying Dragon. It's the twisted one, but I think this has actually been moved into citrus. It's just citrus trifoliata now, I think. This one has these interesting kind of coiled habit as it grows. Has these amazing thorns that are just absolutely wicked on this thing. I'm showing this plant because it's been limbed up into a single trunk tree form, but I also want you to look down here at the bottom where it's suckering. So its natural habit is to become a small multi-trunk tree in the garden, maybe 12, 15 feet in height, something like that, and has this super, super contorted habit. I did these for years at my nursery. We would take the fruit. This is going to have the citrus flowers, the white citrus flowers that we love about citrus plants, fragrant. And then they actually become oranges that look very edible, but they'll turn your face inside out trying to eat one, and they're just absolutely full of seed. And when I say full of seed, when you crack one of these open, it's just a super, super sticky pulp inside and tons of seed. So we would open these up. There's a fruit forming right there, Steph. You can see it. This one has already flowered. There's the fruit forming right there. And this will become about a 2-inch orange over time. We would break them open about the time they fall off the tree and collect the seed. And we had to clean that sticky flesh off of them to store the seed through the winter time. We'd put the seed in a refrigerator, keep it in there for maybe 6 weeks, and then we'd seed them out in the spring. And some of them would come up as the straight species and just be angular. Everything is angular on the straight species. And then some portion of them would come out as flying dragon, which is this contorted one, which is the desirable one that most people want in their gardens if they want this plant. This plant is wicked. And so you want to put this plant where you're not going to have to prune it, not have to think about it. As I joked at the farmer's market, if you have a security concern at your house, this is the one to put around your windows. This is a weeping cherry. This one's called Snow Fountains. It has white flowers. You can get white or pink weeping flowering cherries. They will form, a very small cherry-like fruit on them from where the flowers were. Sometimes you don't always get this, but there's one right there on the back of it. That's okay. You got a spot with 2 right there. Beautiful pendulous habit. I will tell you, when you buy it, it will be almost as tall as it's ever going to be unless you're willing to stake it some. So this one has 2 grafts, and you'll frequently see this on a taller one. So it was grafted down here to a rootstock. Okay, so there's one graft, and then that piece was grown as a straight trunk, and then the weeping form was grafted onto it up here. And so that's how you gain this height out of one of these weeping cherries. Otherwise, you have to stake a piece for a long, long time, and then it's really not a piece that wants to stay rigidly upright. It has to be staked forever unless you do this double grafting method. So would be, this one. From here, you could gain some more height by staking this a little further up if you want to. But again, all of these parts right here are always going to want to lean one direction or another, even after they're staked. Great ornamental plants. I mean, it's hard to miss with one of these. Eventually these limbs will lay all the way down to the ground and go across the ground if you want them to, or you can lift the skirt up on it occasionally by pruning around it, and then you can underplant it a little bit with a ground cover or something like that. Of course, you get the beautiful spring cherry blossom flowers, again in white or pink. This one happens to be a white flowering one. You may or may not get these ornamental small cherries on it. Great foliage. And then this incredible habit. This is a cladrastus called Perkins Pink. And you can see the flowers on this one have that pinkish hue to them. And they hang down in kind of a wisteria type growth habit. They're both in that pea family, so they have similar flower clusters on them. Typically a little bit later, this thing's gonna flower in northern areas, but here we are in mid-April here in Raleigh, and it's in flower now. This one's been limbed up really nicely into a small ornamental tree. These can get between 30 and 50 feet in height, something like that. So I don't know whether, this one's going to need to be scaled as I'm calling this, I'm definitely calling this an ornamental tree for sure, but it has to be scaled to a slightly larger property than some of the other ornamental trees that I might show off that only get, 6 to 25 feet, something like that. So a little bit bigger than that, but what a great American native, a selection of our great American native tree with the pink flowers. This is the award-winning Royal Purple Smoke Bush. We actually had one of these in the garden at the house, but it wasn't getting enough sun to really put on a show. We have one in our neighbor's garden. It's on the other side a shade tree in more sun, and it is quite a bit fuller and really puts on quite a show. So this one leaves out with this incredible purple coloration in the leaves. It does a pretty good job of holding this color through most of the summer, although in the south it will green up some in time. It does need a lot of sun. It needs to be well mulched as well to keep this thing at least partially moist. It doesn't like to be extremely dry. It forms these almost cloud-like flower clusters, and in the summertime or late spring and early summer, and individually each individual flower is just insignificant. But as a whole, they just look like a cloud sitting up on top of one of these. In the fall, you'll start to pick up some color, some additional color in the leaves as well, the orangey kind of color that's also interesting. And then it's got a really nice multi-trunk habit. Typically, I'll occasionally see one of these that are, single trunked or have been manipulated a bit down at the bottom, but more typically you're going to see a multi-trunk stem like this, and also kind of beautiful in the wintertime. But again, put it in the sun. It definitely needs it. Ours was in too much shade. It was leaning out over the street, barely flowered at all. It did keep the purple foliage, but that was about the only thing it had going for it. But in the right space, this is just this one will stop traffic. This is one we've actually added to the native garden recently. This is a river birch called Little King. It's a dwarf river birch, and so it still gets the exfoliating bark. It still gets the great fall color. It's still, one of our great native plants, but the one that is at Jason Stevens' house, at his nursery, is only about maybe 15 feet in height after a very long period of time in the ground. It has a really super interesting habit in the ground. And again, you get all of the benefits of having a river birch without it ending up as a 40-foot tree in time. The roots are also probably likely slightly less aggressive as well. But we put one of these recently again in our native garden at the house, and looking forward to this thing growing up in the future and showing it off. This is one of our great southeastern native trees. It's actually native to south of North Carolina, but hardy all the way up to zone 5. So almost everybody watching can grow. This is the white buckeye, Aesculus parviflora. These, I'm going to call it a small ornamental tree, but I could also call it a large shrub at the same time. So typically we see these around 10, 12 feet tall, but they can be kept smaller than that. These tend to bloom a little bit later than the red buckeyes, but they do that same thing where they form the foliage as it goes, and eventually here, right there, is the flower bud starting to form. These will have white tubular shaped flowers, red stamens. By the time this thing is in bloom, we have lots of hummingbirds out and butterflies out that take advantage of these long tubular flowers. I love the structure of this plant. We have one of these. We have a red buckeye and this one as well in our garden. And again, you can shrub form them a bit, or you can just allow them to grow in time, and it'll just eventually creep up into what we would describe as a large, very large shrub or a small tree. This is Empress of China dogwood from the Southern Living Plant Collection. This is an evergreen dogwood that's hardy in zones 6 to 9. In cold winters, it can thin a little bit, and it did on us this past winter when we had some really hard freeze back in December. But for the most part, it's been evergreen here in zone 7B. Gets covered in these 3-inch bracts. These flowers start to form. It's now June 1st when I'm shooting this, about 2 months ago. So the anticipation is amazing. By mid-June, it'll be fully white. These then form a red edible fruit. Really beautiful plant. These are, again, hardy in zones 6 to 9. They can get 15 to 18 feet in height, something like that, 10, 12 foot in width. Very upright habit, as you can see as I'm standing really close to this. You're gonna see most dogwood types we're thinking about part shade or shade. This one's actually getting a ton of sun out here in the garden, but it does have its roots shaded. We have some other things planted in here close to it. I wouldn't put it out in a full sun condition if you don't have other things planted around it. I think part shade would probably be ideal. Really a great 4-season plant. Again, the anticipation of the flowers on this is 2 months, then another month and a half of flowers, and then a red fruit, and then beautiful shiny green foliage 12 months out of the year. This is Empress of China dogwood from the Southern Living Plant Collection. This is Jane Magnolia. This is one of the National Arboretum hybrids. in the Little Girl series. This is Jane. There are 7 others in the series. These typically bloom about 2 weeks later than other deciduous magnolias, making them slightly less likely to take some of the cold damage because they open very, very early every year. And while it still has the chance of getting frost and freezes, opens with these fragrant flowers. The buds start a magenta color and then become more and more pink over time. They end up pink on the outside, white on the inside. It leafs out with a beautiful dark green, leathery-like foliage, which looks great all season. In the fall, it has a yellow or russet color, fall color, then beautiful gray stems during the wintertime. So it's a kind of a 4-season plant with a lot of anticipation because the flower buds are on them all winter long. They tend to grow as a colony or as a single trunk specimen. You can keep these around 15 feet in height, but they'll get taller than that. They're hardy in zone 4 to 8, tolerant of lots of soils, very drought tolerant once established, really easy ornamental, small flowering tree. This is Jane Magnolia. This is Stellar Ruby Magnolia from the Southern Living Plant Collection. These are hardy in zone 7 to 9. You can see it has an amazing, upright, very full habit. This is an evergreen banana shrub hybrid. It gets these mauve, kind of pinkish colored flowers starting in mid-spring. It was absolutely covered in them for a while. And then it will get some more additional flowers throughout the summer and fall. It can reach about 10 to 15 feet in height, maybe 6 to 8 feet in width, something like that. You could definitely do some shearing on it to keep it narrower if you wanted to. It'd make a fantastic screening plant, or as we have it here, is just a one off in the garden where we have other lower things planted around it. It's just a beautiful backdrop. This one was under 3 feet in height when it went in the ground, and now it's 7.5 feet just 2 years later. So a pretty fast growing plant. We've got it in about 6 hours of direct sun. It can take sun or part shade. The more sun, the fuller it's going to be. Beautiful, lustrous, dark green foliage year round. This is Stellar Ruby Magnolia. This is Cape Harris Magnolia. This one was found back in 1991 at Gilbert's Nursery. It's thought to be a combination of Bracken's Brown Beauty, which is a very large growing southern magnolia that's well known out in the trade, and Little Gem Magnolia, which is very widely available as well, which is kind of a dwarf narrow, has kind of a dwarf narrow habit. This one kind of ends up as the intermediate between the two. It's kind of it doesn't get quite as giant, but it does get pretty big. It can grow up to about 20 feet in height ultimately, and maybe 8 to 10 feet in width. Very long flowering. This thing will start in the spring and flower heavily and then on and off right through the summer months. They're alkaline tolerant, or pH tolerant in general, acidic soils, alkaline soils. They like to go in kind of well-drained soil. Typically, we're going to use these as some sort of screening plant, border plant, where they can be kind of lined up that way, or a specimen plant, just a single specimen plant. This one has become very widely used for its beautiful brown-backed leaves and in Christmas decorating. So a lot of people that do magnolia wreaths use this particular variety. The leaves are up on a bit of an angle, and it really shows off that beautiful brown back on them. Of course, they have these large white fragrant flowers that make, southern magnolias and magnolias in general, so popular with folks. These can dominate a space. That's one thing I'm going to throw out about these southern magnolias. They tend to, whatever space you put them in, they're just going to kind of dominate it. You're not going to plant a lot of things up under them. Very large leaves. They're evergreen, but these very large leaves drop off and kind of coat the ground underneath. And so if you're this thing's going to require 8 to 10 feet in width. So kind of judge your lot based on whether or not you can use one. This is on the slightly slower growing scale for screening plants for sure, but it does make a good screening plant. This is a Little Gem Magnolia. It has a more upright, narrow habit than the regular Magnolia grandiflora, which can get 50 feet wide and 70 feet tall. This as well can get big in time, and I had one at the old house that probably reached 20, 25 feet in height, something like that, but it was only about 6, 7 feet in width at that time, and that's really what makes this plant kind of unique in that way. There are a couple of others like Teddy Bear that have probably a better brown back on the leaf. I think one thing we kind of give up on Little Gem a little bit is I don't think the color the two-tone leaf is quite as pretty. You get the really nice lustrous green top. The leaves are much smaller. You know, it's a dwarf plant. Everything is dwarf about it. Slightly smaller flowers, although still pretty big, just as fragrant. Slightly smaller leaves, although as the plant matures, the leaves do get a little bigger. So that leaf is probably about 5 inches long, something like that, but nothing like regular Magnolia grandiflora. But it does have a great habit. You still get the flowers. They're readily available. You can get, you know, this is in a 50-gallon container right here, and it's about 8 feet in height. So that would give you a good start on it, because again, this is not the fastest growing screening plant. But these can definitely be part of a mixed border screen and make a great addition to the mixed border screen. The way I typically, when I'm in consultations and things and I talk about screening plants, is like, let's stand back and pick what's the most important thing to screen. And then let's get a mixed border, pick a lot of different things, and then put the things that grow the fastest or the appropriate sizes in those holes to make those holes go away faster. But the place along the line that you don't necessarily need it to be screened and super, super fast, Little Gem Magnolia will be a perfect plant for that. This is Teddy Bear Magnolia. This is another narrow, upright selection of our native Magnolia grandiflora, which can get gigantic. This one is typically used in narrower applications. Always comes with this cute little Teddy Bear Magnolia tag. That's how I can recognize it. I will say, so let's see some differences between this one and Little Gem. Little Gem, probably the most common of the narrower upright magnolias. There's a few on the market. You'll notice on Teddy Bear has more of a roundish leaf. It's still a football shaped leaf. It's longer this direction than it is wide, but you can see that it's kind of a little more stunted. So it's a shorter leaf. It's got a great coloration on the back. I would say much, much better overall leaf coloration than Little Gem. I think overall it has a slightly more compact habit on its own without any nursery. The nursery actually having to work on it is hard. It still gets the white fragrant flowers as we would expect on a Magnolia grandiflora. And I think overall it has better representation of the color between the top of the leaf and the bottom of the leaf.